Center for Khmer Studies is an institute devoted to research and education about all aspects of Cambodian society and culture. My name is John Marston. I'm a professor at the Center for Asian and African Studies of El Colegio de Mexico, and also formerly a scholar in residence at Center for Khmer Studies. Center for Khmer Studies, its primary office is at Siem Reap, Cambodia, although we also have offices in Phnom Penh. So be sure to visit us when you're in Cambodia. Today's talk is by Rosa Yi. I'm very excited to hear this talk. I first met Rosa Yi after he'd finished a master's degree at Waseda University in Japan and was teaching at that time at Royal University of Phnom Penh. And I'm very excited to know that he has more recently been pursuing a doctorate at National University of Singapore in geography. And there he has support of the NUS Harvard Yenching Institute. So his talk today will be based on his research in Cambodia, which is also supported by CKS. And the topic is a very far-reaching topic called Political History of Land Struggle and Agrarian Differentiation in Northwestern Cambodia. So welcome, Rosa Yi, and we very much look forward to your talk.
Thank you, John. Let me start with by sharing the screen before I kick off to where hi everybody. Can you see the my presentation slides?
Yes.
Hi, John.
Yes.
Is it working okay? Okay, great. Thank John for the introductions and thanks everybody for joining us this morning. Let me quickly reintroduce myself and my PhD research project before I kick off the talk today on the political history of land struggle and agrarian differentiation in Northwestern Cambodia. So as John introduced, I'm Rosa. I'm a PhD candidate in human geography at the Department of Geography, the National University of Singapore. So I'm now in my fourth year in the PhD program. And my PhD dissertation project is the political ecology of agrarian commodification and labor migrations. What I'm particularly interested in doing in my research project is to examine how contemporary capitalist development of agriculture transform agrarian landscape, shape rural livelihood and outcome and trajectory, and produces different geography of labor. I base my research on a two-village ethnography in Battambang province, Northwestern Cambodia, where I stayed for a period of 10 months between the beginning of March till the end of December 2023. This is where I did my field work. It is in the northwestern part of the country in Battambang province. The dots over here is my first village, which is in Muang Rasay district. I was working with a small rice farming community, where I try to understand the transformation of the village source or natural landscape through intensifying commodity production. And then I spent the second half of my fieldwork in Samlout, which is the topic of today's talk. So original ideas, I did not plan to raise a about political history of land and agrarian transformation. But once I moved to Samlout, I started talking to people. I spent time with people over there. I became increasingly interested in the topic, and that's what brought us here today. So what I'm hoping to get out of this discussion is that I hope to develop that particular chapter to become one of the empirical chapter of my dissertation. And today's talk is so much on my work in progress. So what I'm going to do is to throw in all the empirical understanding that I learned from the field. I will be glad to get some comments and feedback and possibly some suggestion of how I should work on the paper and fully develop it into a chapter and a paper later. For today, I'm going to try to just cover several points that I think are most important. It's a work in progress, so there's a lot of things to think, a lot of things to put in together. But I'm going to just touch on starting with a political history of Samlout, how and what it really means to the contemporary agrarian landscape as we see it today. And I introduce my study village and the research method. The second half of my presentation will be on the study village that I try to understand its agrarian landscape from a more like historically situated political ecology of initial land distribution, which took place in the post-conflict period after the political reintegration, and what it's meant to today land struggle and the widening of social differentiation among different subset of the population. And I will conclude my presentation today with a very brief discussion of how we can possibly better understand the contemporary issues through a more historical lens by intersecting initial lands access, capitalist commodity production, labor migration, and wealth uneven wealth inequality. So let me start with a political history of Samlout. So there's always a close association between Samlout district as a region and Pol Pot regime or the Khmer Rouge. So it's began with the 1967 incident when there was a peasant rebellion began in Samlout and expanded throughout the years until the middle of 1967. Again, the government, agricultural policy, land dispossession, and military suppression at the time. The Samlout incident was always associated with the beginning of the Cambodian revolutionary movement that eventually led to the victory of the Khmer Rouge and the Pol Pot regime. Samlout continued affiliation, association with the Khmer Rouge even after the downfall of the Democratic Kampuchea in 1979, when it became a base for Khmer Rouge resistance against the government until the late 1990s. To say it is a base is, to me, it's quite an understatement. It's a very important base, a primary base. Pol Pot himself visited to the region after he escaped the Vietnamese army, or during the resistance years, Samlout became a route where all the military supply went through before being distributed to other part of the resistance bases. So during the resistance year in the 1980s and 1990s, Samlout was the base for two divisions, Division 505 and Division 404, under the commands of Liam Mốt. I'm sure some of you are familiar, who was the ex-Democratic Kampuchea Navy commander and a son-in-law of Tamok. And Division 404 was under the command of Sumate, an Air Force, ex-Air Force commander. What is interesting throughout the resistance years that the beginning of 1990, when Paris peace agreement was made, it's also marked the kind of like the end of Chinese military support for the Khmer Rouge resistance, which, as we see, mark also the beginning of the aggressive expansion of natural resource extractions, which the Khmer Rouge resistance found it necessary in order to fund their own resistance operation in the absence of Chinese money. So, for example, in Samlout, the under Division 404, which includes Sung and what we call Old Samlout, were very rich in precious stone, as rich as Pailan area, while Tatao Kampung under Division 505 was very rich in hardwood tree. The Khmer Rouge warlord at the time were in full control of this natural resource extraction, and that's allowed them to accumulate a lot of wealth, millions of dollars from selling logging and mining rights to Thai businesses. What I'm trying to emphasize over here is that these accumulated wealth by Khmer Rouge leaders later on became what we call spills of war, and the spill of war which played a very critical role in shaping post-war agrarian landscape, not only in Samlout, but also in other parts of the country, including Pailan, Birwe, and so on. So after 2 decades of violence, conflicts between the Khmer Rouge resistance and the government, a peace agreement was made between the two parties in late 1990s, to be precise, in December 1999, what we call samanharonakam, or political reintegration. The key to securing this agreement between the government and the Khmer Rouge leader was to appease through the appeasement of Khmer Rouge leader. So, for example, its Khmer Rouge leader were promised key political position, and they were also allowed to continue to control wealth and resource extraction businesses, which they have been in control since late 1980s and throughout 1990s. So these Khmer Rouge leaders also, based on the samanharonakam or reintegration policy, was that they were allowed to also be in control of land distribution to militants, to ex-militant turned farmers, in order to accommodate their transition into new agrarian life, which as we see, produce new agricultural landscape and frontier in all the former Khmer Rouge stronghold. So my key arguments over here is that what I try to understand and what I try to engage throughout the chapter is that this new agrarian landscape is shaped, even though it's not determined by the region long political history of warfare and resource extractions, and also by the process of political reintegration that followed in conjunction with the post-conflict context, which I think is very critical to understanding contemporary land struggle and agrarian differentiation in the regions. So my argument is established through my ethnography of Samlout, where I did a 4-month field work in a village called Battambang at the start of August until the end of December, where I was also working as a volunteer at the village primary school. So throughout this 4 months, I conducted 50 household survey, which is about 25% of the total number of the village household. And I also did 50 live history interview with farmers, farm laborers, agricultural commodity traders, most of whom, many of them are former Khmer Rouge militants. I also did 10 formal and informal group discussion with them during morning coffee, evening beers, and dinner. I also did 15 key informal interview with local authority, agricultural cooperative, NGOs, workers, and agricultural extensionists. So this is the village very close to Thai's border. On the left-hand side, as you see, all these regions were under divisions. During the resistance years, they were under divisions 404 and 505. You see, as I point over here, from load, we call all some load from load ja. Today, and Song were under 404. Back to the resistance year, they were engaged in mining with Thai businesses. On the right-hand side, the sign where I did my field work down to Tataok. The area were under Division 505, and they were engaged in selling logging right to Thai businesses throughout the 1990s. So the village, Battambang has a population of about a little bit over 1,000 people, 450 households. Half of them are immigrants from lowland Cambodia, lowland Battambang and Cambodia. Today, livelihood is mostly agricultural commodity production. There's different type of farmers engaging in different type of crop, flex crop or permanent crop. So for example, a wealthier farmer over the past 20 years, those who have been able to accumulate more wealth on the way, they are able to transit, to make a transition from flex crop to more permanent crop, for example, mango, cashews, and rubber, while the majority of the village household remain actively engaged in flex crop dominated by cassava, red corn, and vegetable growing. Land access began with the land redistribution during the integration time, when forest land was distributed to demobilize Khmer Rouge militants. As we see today, there's an increase in struggle for land. A lot of struggling farmers have been dispossessed by their wealthier neighbors who are doing somewhat better than them. There's a growing number of landless and land poor farm laborers who are reproducing themselves by selling their labor, either within the community or now I think increasingly on the move to neighboring Thailand, because Samlout at one point after the integration, it spread itself as a destination for migrants. So a lot of people always find it's like now after 10 years, after 20 years, people are no longer moving in, but there's more people are moving out. But still we see a trend of a landscape when people keep moving in and keep moving out in order to reproduce themselves. So the village, Battambang, when I present the other half of my paper, I'm going to repeatedly talk about Angkor Chai and land distribution during the integration year. So in the year 2000, the village was informally established. It was formally established in 2003, but people started to settle down in the beginning of 2000, when the village became home to demobilized militants from Division 505. And Uncle Jai, who was back then the lieutenant of the division, became the new district police chief, and he was in charge of the village establishment over a densely forested area. So today, the village household comprise ex-Khmer Rouge militants who always call themselves as old people, and various group of immigrants identify as youth people. These immigrants normally have direct or loose tie to the old people. A lot of them are connected to Uncle Jai. So when the village was established, it became a new agricultural frontier that it drew a lot of immigrants from lowlands area, mostly those who were struggling for farmland in conjunction with increasing land dispossession in the central region of the country. But they also include late returnee from refugee camp and army, people who after the war ended decided not to settle down in Samlout, and they decided to go back home to their province of origin, only to find themselves with no claim to land, and they ended up returning to the area. At which point land was already distributed and they had also no claim. So they became today farm laborers. So with this land redistribution, we start to see the initial uneven access to land and initial social differentiation within the community. So there's a lot of the land distribution was based on, I think, across all the former Khmer Rouge resistant bases, based on the 5-hectare rule, which in principle, every household was allocated a forest land of 5 hectares. What they were supposed to do in order to claim the land was to clear that 5-hectare forest and own that 5-hectare land. But on the ground, because it was so much an unwritten rule, actual land access was highly fragmented and rife. Shaped by existing power structure and access to resources, which emphasize mainly capital and labor. So the ultimate access to land was highly uneven. So to discuss this uneven access, I subdivide the village population and household into 4 different groups. And it's try to explain how initial access to land shape their today's socio-economic positions. So I start with group number 1. So I call this process as variegated process of land distributions because it's so diverse, it's so conflicted, it's so fragmented. Even those it was based on the 5-hectare rule. So group number 1, I connect back to Uncle Jai, as I said, and his ex-military network. So Jai was awarded the position of Samlout district chief in the newly formed district administration. As one of the former leader during the resistance years, Jai was able to enjoy quite a lot of spills of war. So he holds both old and new political powers and resources from the wartime, including money accumulated through selling logging rights, logging equipment, trucks, and laborers that Jai was able to clear and claim wells over 200,000 land in the village, which is the largest holding in the areas right now. His others ex-military network were able to do, even though it's not exactly the same size, but almost exactly the same size. So what makes them difference is that with all these resources, all the spills of war, they started a new life during the post-war time with more land and more capital. So how we see them today is that as I encounter this group have become political and economic elites in the community, and they are also in control of the local economy, especially capitalizing on their wartime business network with Thai businesses and the capital that accumulated during wartime. That today some of them started as farmers, but they became larger and larger farmer, holding more and more land. Some of them have been able to transition from into a permanent crop, or is it farming completely, renting out their land to other struggling farmers, which is different from the rest of other members of other groups. So group number 2, for example, comprise all Khmer Rouge militant turned farmers. They were demobilized militant of Division 505. This first group settled along the main road, which today give them a lot of advantages in terms of access to social infrastructure in market. They may not owns a lot of land, but because they were the first group to settle, they settle along the main road. Today they have their land has a better market compared to other groups compared to group 3. Our initial land claim among the group was through forest clearing, when they were allowed to clear 5 hectares of forest for farmland. But the actual land claim, the ultimate land claim through forest clearing was, and this is where I also want to emphasize, was highly uneven depending on actual household resources. So depend on labor, depend on capital. So the problem with the 5 hectare rule was that forest land was allocated, but you have to clear the land in order to claim that 5 hectare land. But then it depends on how much resources that you had, how much labor that you had. So for example, a lot of female or women-led household, those who lost their husband during the wartime, were not able to clear the forest and claim the 5 hectare land. A lot of them settle with 2 or 3 hectares, while other household with capital or with maid labor, they were able to claim a lot more. So ultimately, we see uneven access to land. Even those initially land access was based on the 5 hectares rule. So you see a lot of household owning just 3 or 4 hectares of land, and some others were are holding over 10,000 of land today. Regardless of land claim, today this group are farmers, and just like other farmers, other smallholders farmers across the country, they are struggling with social reproduction, especially under the deepening precarious condition of commodity production. So in their case, for example, they are deeply engaged in cassava and occasionally red corn production for Thai's market, making them highly vulnerable and precarious to price volatility and other farming risks. There's a widening wealth inequality within this group, even though they started almost at exactly as the former militant turned farmers. Today, you see a lot of what we call intimate dispossession between more successful and struggling farmers. There's a growing indebtedness, which happen in many parts of, become a feature of rural Cambodia. But then there's also a larger pool of labor selling class, which has pressured a lot of people to again leave the place that they migrated in and migrated out to other places in order to make their living. So we move to group number 3, which are immigrants from the lowland area. So these include some land poor and also agricultural entrepreneurs from the lowland in search of land or bigger land. They take advantage of the land value differentiation from their hometown. So they move in with some cash by selling their land in their home provinces, usually at a better price, in order to buy cheaper and bigger land from group number 1, members of group number 1 and group number 2. Typically, they hold between 2 or 4 hectares of land. Some of them have strikes. So, for example, you see in the photo, this family came from my hometown in Khmer province, a place which is very famous for vegetable growing. They came to Samlout. They started growing vegetable, and they're doing great right now, being able to accumulate on over 10 hectares of land, beginning from 4. But again, just like group number 2, many of them have fallen down their economic position through precarious commodity production, and a lot have become landless laborer, losing their land to their neighbors. If we try to look into group number 2 and group number 3, what we see is that the land spatial difference, as I said, group number 2, because they were the first group to settle, they settled along the main road. That's give them a lot of advantages in terms of different accesses, including accessing lands market. But they are actually struggling with growing difficult, more difficult condition of agrarian life. Group number 4, which is the final group, as a group of landless farmers. They hold the lowest social position in the community. Most of them came to village through Angkor Chai. They include demobilized, militant, and refugee returning household with no access to land in the home villages. Like I introduced earlier, after the war ended, a lot of people returned home from refugee camp in Thailand. A lot of people were demobilized from their army unit. They were given the option of settling along the former resistant bases and make their living over there, or they were able to return to their home villages, which they left before the war. And a lot of them chose to return back home only to find that land was already distributed and they could not claim any land. And through connection to Chai, they were able to return to work for him as farm laborer. Chai employs a lot of these people in this group in order to clear forest for him during the earlier phase of the integration. That's explained that his control over the labor. Today, they are farm laborer, circular migrant whose social reproduction is sustained through farm wages or migration. Many of them are constantly on the move, in and out of the village. As you see on the left-hand side, a family of landless laborer. The father of the man that you see standing here worked for Chai during wartime. His family returned back to the camp in 2000, at which point they found out that there was no land for them anymore. Chai asked them to return back to Samlout and work for him. And since 2000 until today, which is over 20 years, the family have been engaging in farm wages, farm work without owning any lands. And it has already become more like intergenerational farms laborer. So let me give some quick discussions of how I see the subdivision of the group understood through their early access to land and their settlement history by intersecting land access, commodity production, labor migration, and agrarian differentiation to understand to better understand the contemporary landscape of the region today. So I see through the politics of land and ecological and political transformation during the wartime periods that we are able to see today land struggle and differentiation extend the longer history of warfare, resource extraction, as concentration of power and wealth in the hands of ex-Khmer Rouge leaders. And so far, because of the integration policy from 2000, their grips on powers and wealth have gone unchallenged. And this has been going hands in hand with an increase in land commodification and capitalist commodity production. When land's market was developed and reinforced land conservation, struggling farmers now are forced to sell or rent out their land to better off neighbor. And as we have seen, so far, this has enlarged a class of farm laborer who rely on agricultural wages as a necessary source income. For some who are struggling to depend on wage labor opportunity in the village, they are on the move to the urban center or especially to neighboring Thailand, which is 20 kilometers away from Samlout. So agrarian differentiation, as we see, or as I see when I was in the field in Premium Change, to me, it reflects the polarization of household in relation to the control of means of production, agricultural production, which is land. And because and different access to land is derived from power directly inherited from the Khmer Rouge integration process. The integration policy, the five-hectare rule, which was very highly fragmented, and as the processes of differentiation have further unfolded along the opening of agricultural frontier, they have developed a significant spatial divisions. Land uncertainty, for example, has emerged, and it is shaped by pre-existing processes of social differentiation between farmers. So as I see in the community now, there's a small number of people or small number of farmers who are able to move up their social ladder, while the majority of them have reinforced the necessity of migrating or depending on farm wages in order to socially and materially reproduce themselves. So this transformation create spatially differentiated lands dynamic in some load that reshape pre-existing pattern of agrarian change and reinforce the pre-existing pattern of social differentiation. I'm going to end my talk here. I'm happy to take questions and comments. I would be happy to answer more questions in case you have any. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, thank you very, very much for this fascinating talk, which I think is fascinating both from a historical perspective as well as the contemporary social situation. The fact that this transition from Khmer Rouge control to which was gradual, and the fact that the current system still has its roots in Khmer Rouge control of the area, I find this extremely interesting and part of a very important historical process, as well as I think this whole issue of the political economy of rural Cambodia is extremely important, and I very much welcome this field work, which is very illuminating. So we can open up to questions, and okay. So, and I have some questions too, but and I see when I've done this before, we relied heavily on written questions. I noticed for the first time on the list of participants, it seems to have the option of allowing people to speak. And so either one is okay with me if you have a way of, by raising your hand, indicating that you'd like to speak. But the first question I have is a written question from Aruna Wijayawardena, and I apologize if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. I'm interested about sustainable housing and agriculture practice in Cambodia. Could you please let me know if there are particular places, individuals, or institutes in your focused area? How would you respond to that?
Yeah, Aruna, thank you for the questions. Well, I think it's more like logistical questions. So in Samlout, they have agricultural cooperative in both my first village and second village. But my understanding of agricultural cooperative in Cambodia is that they're not really functioning properly. But they are NGO who you can really get in touch with, and they have been working on agricultural practices. For example, in Samlout, there's an ongoing project conducted by an organization called Partner for Rural Development, get a funding from the University of Melbourne. So they have been working with farmers through farm with cassava farmer, and they have a demonstration cassava farm working closely with farmers, teaching them how to, for example, pest control, how to select cassava stem and so on. So if you want, I can definitely drop you an email introducing you to the organization that you can stay in touch. But they're doing a great job. They have been working in the area for so many years. Their project is still ongoing, a very, very big project. They have a team of people working on political economy and also people who are really agronomists. So a good team that you definitely should get in touch if you are interested.
Thank you. The next is more of a comment than a question, but I'll read it. From Sunrati, many thanks to Mr. Rosa Yi demonstrating real agriculture practice in Cambodia. Blessing. And I certainly agree with that. It is so valuable to get the sense of what is really happening on the ground. Next question is by Liz Guthrie, which I think is also quite important. Have the farmers in Samlout had to deal with any problems associated with deforestation, loss of biodiversity, infertile land, landslides, flooding? And yes, I think there are implicit in your description of your research project, you talk about political ecology. And at least in this presentation, you haven't talked so much about ecology. So I think that would be quite interesting to address the problems associated with deforestation here.
Okay, I'm saying Liz and saying John. Yeah. So I think if let me start with maybe contemporary setting of how smallholder farmers are struggling with the loss of biodiversity, maybe as more specifically on infertile land. So as you see in the photo over here, it's the photo of village that I took from the top of the mountains. People do farming even on the top of the mountain, even though they have no legal claim to the land. But then the village or most part of Samlout, today agricultural land were from were once densely forested area. So I did a lot of interview and a lot of mail to claim land. And the problem with the landscape of Samloat is that it's so mountainous, so hilly. The first few years, farmers were able to enjoy high productivity from their farming. But because it's very hilly, with the loss of forest, the cover, the cover land cover, the top of the soil, also lose the fertility very quickly. So after less than 10 years, for example, farmer became concerned with the lower productivity that they got. And that's also mean in order to get high productivity, they are required to supplement the loss of soil natural fertility with chemical fertilizer, and also the use of pesticide in order to produce their crop. So I think the loss of fertility is one of the most critical points through deforestation.
That's very interesting. And I guess my question, it sounds like the deforestation started before the peace agreement with the Khmer Rouge. And is it pretty much already deforested, or is it an ongoing process?
So in the 1990s, as I understand, logging began. As I also touched on a little bit, I also need to do some fact checks, but based on my interview was that when in the early 1990s, in some part of the Khmer Rouge stronghold, extraction, natural resource extraction, for example, in Thailand began very early, but I think it was intensified after the Paris Peace Agreement when China, the Chinese military support began to dry, and the Khmer Rouge found it necessary to fund their own operation, and the only way in order to fund the operation was through natural resource extraction. In some load, for example, in some part of Samloat under the Division 404, they were actively engaged in mining by selling mining rights to Thai businesses. The other part, including Tatao, Kapung, Lepeu under Division 505, it was so rich of hardwood trees, and that they also sold a logging rights to Thai businesses. So it began in 1990s, but that was a certain part in the village where I did my study. For example, I don't think it's correct to call it deforestation, because people were given forest land, and to claim land they had to cut down trees. So it was not deforestation. It was like mandatory for them. It was compulsory for them to cut down trees, because the objective at the time was not to cut down tree in order to sell timber for profit, to cut down tree in order to claim land, and people competed with each other to cut down tree in order to claim more land. People who could cut down more could claim more land as well. And I think that's part of the forest loss. But I don't think it's correct to we call it a deforestation.
Yeah, well, would be interesting to know more about that. I guess was it legal then? Was it totally legal or was it illegal at all?
It was totally legal and it was
Yeah.
mandatory. There's a story like um these militant turns farmers, they cut down tree, they did not know what to do with all the tree, which if today we could sell for millions of dollars, but they did not know what to do, they just burn on the tree. Because the objective was that after integration, these militant were demobilized, and they had to depend on farmer on farming in order to reproduce themselves. So in order to reproduce themselves, they need land, and they were given land, but it wasn't land; it was forest land, and everybody was allowed to cut down trees in order to claim land.
Okay, that's very interesting. Well, the next it's a comment, not a question, by the filmmaker David Feingold. He writes, excellent presentation. I filmed and interviewed many Khmer Rouge in 1988, 1989, and during the early and middle 1990s. Your work is highly insightful. So far I haven't asked my own questions, but
Yeah.
the big question in your work is that, of course, you're comparing this area with the more lowland area of Mong Rasai district. And so one question would be the fact that this is an ex-Khmer Rouge area and the Khmer Rouge former commanders have a great deal of power. Are the power relations here significantly different than you find them to be, for example, in your research in Hmong district?
Thank you, Jones. But I think the context are quite different. So in most lowland area, including Hmong, for example, Hmong is also to me what I found during my fieldwork was that it was also different part of mainstream discussion on land distribution, land privatization, post solidarity group in the middle of 1980s. So mainstream discussion is after the downfall of Pol Pot regime, the new government introduced Krom Samaki. It's a collective farming, which was not very popular, and they decided to dissolve this collective farming. At which point land was privatized, were redistributed to household as a private ownership that they could begin farming and supporting themselves. In Mong Say, the story is a little bit different. Krom Samaki did not take place. People settled down very early in the beginning of 1980s. Every household, regardless of the number of family household members, every household was given 2 hectares of land, rice land. But because land was quite abundant, they were able to claim more through clearing. I think in Cambodian agrarian setting, they call land claim through plows. Those who were able to plow more, clear forest, could claim more. But it was not the land condition landscape that we see in Samlout.
Okay.
Sorry, John. But what I find similar is how we can possibly understand today's last land struggle in these two villages is that the starting point, initial land claim played a very critical role.
Okay, but would would it be true to say, just as there's a power elite in Samlout, which happens to be the Khmer Rouge former commanders, is a power elite also, has it also arisen in Mon district, but maybe a different category of persons?
Yeah, I think in Mongolsey or many part of the country apart from the former Khmer Rouge stronghold, I think the political setting, political context was completely different. Um, um, of course there's a, for example, there's when you claim land through clearing forest in Muong or some other part, it was also subject to village hierarchy. You need approval from village chief, from the local authority. I think at the time there was a power of land control was concentrated within the local level, within the local community. So you were able to claim land, but you also need approval from local authority, which I think the context is different from what we are discussing this morning in Samlout, when the Khmer Rouge leader were well awarded in terms of position. They were also allowed to maintain the wealth that they accumulated through natural resource extraction during the wartime, and it's a win-win policy. After the integration, they were also allowed to be in full control of land distribution to their people, which at the time also allowed them to claim a lot more land compared to ordinary ex-militant.
Okay, that's very interesting. Okay, the next question is from Lam Long. He says, thank you for your great presentation. I'm a bit wondering about group 3, immigrants from lowland. Can you talk more about that? For instance, why they migrated to that area? Second, is there any mine issue? Is there any issue of landmines?
Sang Long, for group 3, there's also, we can subdivide the group into a different group, but they are all, they were all immigrants from lowland area. Some of them were struggling for land in their own community, and they found a new frontier, a good opportunity to, have access to land. But there were also some people, for example, as I said, I fortunately ran into some people from my hometown. They were doing well in their home village, in my hometown, growing vegetable, but coming to Samlout allowed them to expand their agricultural productions. So, for example, the land price in my hometown was higher, so they could sell one piece of land with a better price compared to land in Samlout, so that with the amount of money that they brought from lowland, they were able to buy a bigger piece of land in Samlout that they could expand their vegetable production. So it's so much depend, but some people came because they were having problem with access to land. I think also from 1990s, land struggle has become a critical feature of Cambodian neoliberal development pathway. So a lot of people were dispossessed, a lot of people were kicked out of their own land because of the land concession. And when the new frontier, a new agricultural frontier were opened in Samloat and others, Khmer Rouge stronghold, they took the opportunity, and that's what brought them there. Man, yes, Samloat. I think the problem with Samloat, and that's why Samloat, if you compare Samloat to other former Khmer Rouge stronghold, socio-economically, they are not doing great compared to Pailan, compared to Cambriang, Phnom Penh, and Sampoi Loon, other parts of Battambang. For example, Samloat, I think, in terms of economic development, Samloat is the lowest in the sense. And the during wartime, and I think also it's reached the peak in 1997, as we remember, when there was a kind of like internal fighting in Phnom Penh. It was also involved the division 505 of Samlout. Division 505 was at the time was in conversation with the Funzenpech faction of the government. And at the time, because they were talking to a different group from CVP, once the 1997 incident happened, they were forced to escape to Thailand for a year, and Samlout became a strategic location when the victors, the armed force, began to through a lot of landmine. So after 1997, Samlout had the biggest number of landmine compared to other regions. Which I was actually also concerned during my field work, but people guaranteed that it was completely okay. There are still some, but not. There are signs also that we should not be concerned when we go through some load. So I think I have a photo over here. Here, you can see that mine were there, but now you should not be concerned, because people already picked this landmine sign and make it the place where the cow eat already.
So are you saying the landmines date to 1997 period and not to the Pol Pot period?
Throughout the recent years already, but
Right, yeah,
I mean the peak point.
Yeah.
It linked to the incident in 1997.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's surprising.
It was a long story, but yeah,
Yeah. Okay. The next question is by Vishet Sen. Thank you, Rosa, for an informative and insightful presentation. I appreciated an opportunity to learn about the historical context of that part of Cambodia where you conducted your field research and the insights from rich empirical data that you've collected. I would be interested to hear your view on the following question. Does patronage practice deeply embedded in Cambodian society contribute to the precarity of the lives of the people in the region of your study? If so, in what way?
There are yes, I think it's part of Cambodian culture, but to be specific, in my village, for example, part of the patronage practices, because Uncle Chai, which I mentioned repeatedly through my presentation, he was the guy in charge. In addition to bringing his relative to clear land, to also make some land claim, he was also able to provide them some low-rank political position or government official position. So, for example, a lot of his relatives not only had access to land, they also got government position in the newly formed administration, especially because he was the head of the police chief. He has a lot of relative in the police rank until today.
Okay.
So I think it's if we go to the village today, some of his relatives are doing well. They have become large landowner. Some of them are still doing farming, but they're doing a lot of better farming. They are also involved in money lending to smaller farmers. They are technically more successful. They are able to accumulate more land from others, and this we have to connect back to how they first began to access to land and other resources, and because of their linkage to political linkage to to Chai. I think one interesting thing about contemporary agricultural production in that region is that a lot of this former Khmer Rouge elite, they continue to control local economy because they have resources. They also have a business connection to Thailand. A lot of them has been doing business with Thai partners for so many years. And because of that connection, they are now able to runs to operate agriculture-related business. So, for example, like most silo, cassava and red corn silo in the region are run by this group. So, for many, I think there's a study in the case of Thailand, for example, the cassava production and red corn production is viewed as a new form of resource extraction, to the disadvantage of producer.
Okay, that's all very, very interesting. The next question is sort of a follow-up question by David Feingold. He said, I make films, but I'm an anthropologist. I find it fascinating that the ex-KR have reproduced an extreme version of class structure that they supposedly overthrew. Did you find any acknowledgement of this paradox?
Yeah, interesting question. I think I also get a lot of question from my friends, for example, how the kind of like the story that ex-Khmer Rouge warlord or foot soldier would tell me about life. And what I find is that when I talk to this ex-Khmer Rouge militant, they're just militants, people who took order. They did what they were supposed to do at the lower level, but at the upper level, I think my personally, class structure was a political tool, or overthrow of class structure was a political means to get into power. I don't know if these Khmer Rouge leaders were so much, upholding this political ideology. I think they to me they were just warlords, people who took opportunity, and when opportunity came, they capitalized on the opportunity and enriched themselves. What I presented throughout the talk today as a spillover war, and that spillover war to me played a very important role and contribute to our understanding of what is going on today in the village.
Yes, for sure. The next question is by Buti Chow. Thank you for including a chapter of Battambang in your academic work. It seems historically Battambang has been on the margin but connected to the outside world, including Phnom Penh and Bangkok. I wonder if you could say more about the development and roles of transportation networks in the areas of human migration and agriculture and forest economy.
Thank you, Buti. Yeah, I think the focus is on the development and role of transportation network. So for migration, for example, I think migration infrastructure has improved significantly from the beginning of 1990s. So you go in my first village in Monasay, migration to Thailand has become intergenerational. Some has already become like the third generation has been on the move to Thailand, And what I could see is that the grandparents, for example, migrated to Thailand from the beginning of 1990s through by walking to the border, paying a broker some money in order to cross the border into Thailand. The second and third generation now, because of, like you said, the better road infrastructure or better migration infrastructure in general. Also with the policy change in Cambodia and Thailand concerning labor migration between the two countries, more and more people now are crossing the border with full documentation. So they're not in my village in Muong, for example, nobody goes to Thailand without document anymore. So it has improved significantly. People are moving a lot more freely. People are moving more legally. But I'm not saying by moving legally, by moving with not full documentation, they are doing better in terms of their economic return from migration. There's a lot of other issues to talk, but yeah, they are moving more legally, more with full documentation, a lot better.
Okay.
Sorry, John, I think I missed some part of the question, but what he can ask more if he wants, because I think I missed some part of the
Okay.
question.
Yes, I see that now. Okay. Yes. Okay, can you talk now, Bhuti?
Could you hear me now?
Oh,
Yes.
yes.
Okay, good. Well, first of all, again, thank you very much to CKS for doing this, and also by extension, thanks to Rosa Yi for sharing your work on this. And I came from Battambang, so that's my hometown. So again, thank you for including a chapter of Battambang in your work. What I was trying to say here is that somehow Battambang as an area, Battambang territory as an area historically have been on the margin, but it's always connected to an outside world. We even have scholarly work from the 7th century, even before the Angkorian period, that somehow Battambang or people from Battambang have been established or exist in the record from China, for example, from that area. And then between the Bangkok and the Phnom Penh, there's always Battambang is kind of like a center for people to migrate through different regime and different era. A lot of people move in and out. A lot of people exit Cambodia and end up in a different world. And we can see through the linguistic work that when people do study or linguistic work, the interview, most of the people are from Battambang. So that's sort of the historical context for Battambang and its people, that for people migrate through it. But what I would like to point out back to the political economy or land distribution, and then on edge with the ecology and sort of nature and human here. I read something on Facebook a while back saying about in the 60s, during the Sangkum Niyum regime, the king, the father, actually tried to have some sort of rural development policy, and Battambang was one part of it. And then they're talking about, because Battambang is known to people that is a rice bowl of Cambodia. So usually people do rice farming. However, in the 60s, they tried to develop a sort of a plantation, industrial plantation. And there was also sort of an input from an outside, in this case from China. So they built the what do you call it? Jute factory, Rong Chak Kachao no Don Tio, and also Rong Chak Dambang, which is the sort of the cloth, cotton industry. Have Rong Chak Kachao, which is around Battambang city, but to encourage people to grow beside the edible fruit plantation, also the develop this sort of industrial agriculture. And that when the upper part of Battambang, not the lower part that connect to the Tonle Sap, but the upper land part become in the picture in terms of granting people have land, all that kind of stuff. But even back then, the picture was not pretty, just like what you demonstrate here is uneven because yeah, you can grab land, there's no title, all that kind of stuff, but it's up to your ability to do it on your own. So it was not much successful. But back to today and lately I heard from maybe last year, the Chinese were back in town. So they tried to help Cambodia or whatever it is around the Tonle Sap provinces about developing some sort of agri-business or the production facility to take agricultural output to do that kind of stuff. And then the road develop the network. And also, by the way, historically, there's a mention that the Songkai River, because it's navigatable all the way to the Tonle Sap, and that play a significant role even for a forest product. Posat probably have more forest product, but there is no outlet to Tonle Sap, so there is no transportation network that facilitate transportation, all that kind of stuff. I read an article by a lady who traveled through Cambodia in 1922 when she traveled from Phnom Penh to Battambang on a car with the superior resident of Battambang. But then when they travel to Angkor, they travel through Songkai River. So Songkai River play a role in terms of transportation for logistics. Then lately, as you probably mentioned, there's also further development land transportation on by extension of the road 57 now is the road 20 or the road 10 is that highway 10 that cut through Samlout to Koh Kong, all that kind of stuff. I wonder all that kind of stuff play a role in the land distribution and the land market and also the agricultural aspect of it. Sorry, that's kind of a long story, but that I feel hopefully this is a contribution to the discussion here about the land and the political aspect of it and the ecology aspect of it in that part of the world. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Vati. Well, John, can I say a few words?
Please, please.
Oh yeah, no, it's just like Battambang. When it's come to Battambang, it's well, I love the province. And it's always a very important location, and for especially for the agrarian economy in Cambodia. The French, for example, started investing in Battambang was the first province that the French chose in order to develop irrigation system. In order to back then intensify rice production for export. So it has been a significant strategic economic location for agriculture in the country for so long. Just like you said, it's a rice bowl of the country. There has been a lot of improvement in terms of infrastructure. So if you talk about Chinese money, you know, cohort irrigation system. Mm-hmm. With the money from China, built by Chinese company. Cohort, I think when it was under construction or right after in construction, cohort was the largest irrigation system in the country, and that's built by Chinese money in order to intensify commercial rice production in the province. So yeah, there's a huge improvement in terms of infrastructure, road infrastructure in Samlout, for example. At the beginning, Samlout farmers began cultivating cassava late compared to other former Khmer Rouge strongholds like Pailan, Cambriang, Phnom Penh, and Sampoi Lun. One of the reasons was the area was disconnected, physically disconnected from other parts. So they could only cultivate flex crop like sesame, green bean, earth nuts, and so on. And the market at the time in the 2000 depends so much on informal traders from neighboring district. And one road construction was complete that connects Samlout to Thailand, for example. It was also the time when a commodity trader from Thailand started to introduce cassava to Samlout. And now I think in the last 10 or 5 or 6 years, it was the first time that Samlout had their own silo operations, meaning that cassava now is being able to get transported directly from Samlout to Thailand without having to depend on middlemen from Khmer Rouge, Phnom Penh, or Thailand. So at least farmers have closer access to the market because of these road constructions.
Okay, well, I think we may be out of questions now, and we're getting close to our ending time. Are there any more questions? If not, well, thank you to, well, especially to Rosa Yi for your fascinating presentation. And thank to all of you for a very, very strong and very interesting question and answer session, which I think we all enjoyed very much. And so I'll close with that. And again, thank you all very, very much.
Thank you, John. Thank you everybody for coming. I'm glad to see you here. Have a good day.
Thank you.